You were worth $11,400,000, and the woman at the DMV renewed your license without looking up twice. That's the whole trick. Not a disguise, not a performance of modesty, just a life built so quietly that nobody in Cassville, Wisconsin, population 4,012, one stoplight, one diner that closes at 2, has ever had a reason to ask. You drive a 2009 Ford Ranger with a dent in the tailgate you've never bothered to fix. You buy your coffee at the gas station on Route 133 because it's 50 cents cheaper than the diner and tastes about the same. The gap between what people assume about you and what's actually true isn't an accident, it's the architecture. Performance is loud and temporary. Architecture is quiet and it compounds. It starts 16 years ago on a Tuesday with a building nobody wanted. You were 24 working the parts counter at the John Deere dealership outside town when you noticed the old Rexall pharmacy on Main Street had been sitting empty for 11 months. Boarded windows, a for sale by owner sign gone gray in the weather. Most people walked past it the way they walked past everything else that looked finished. You stopped. The owner, a widow named Doris Halverson, whose husband had run the pharmacy for 31 years, wanted $14,000 for the building and the lot behind it. You had $6,200 saved. She took a payment plan, 40 months, no interest, because she said she'd rather see somebody try something than watch the windows stay boarded. You didn't have a plan for the pharmacy, you had a plan for the lot behind it. 4 parking spaces rented by the month to the county extension office next door, $60 a space, $240 a month on a building that cost you $14,000. Not glamorous, not even interesting really, but it was $240 more than the building had made the month before, which was 0. That was the first number. It wouldn't be the last. The pharmacy itself sat empty another 2 years while you paid down Doris's note with parts counter wages and parking money. Then Merle Beatrick, who ran the hardware store across the street, mentioned over coffee that his nephew was closing a laundromat in Prairie du Chien, 20 minutes south, and needed to sell the machines fast. 12 washers, 8 dryers, all working, $4,300 for the lot. You bought them. You put them in the old pharmacy. You didn't rebrand it, didn't put up a sign with a clever name, just a hand-painted board that said, "Wash," because that's what it did. Net after utilities and the water bill, $890 a month on a building you already owned outright. That's when the pattern started to show itself, and once you saw it, you couldn't stop seeing it. 18 months later, a vending route came up for sale. A retiring route driver named Gary Trulson had 11 machines scattered across 3 counties, gas stations and break rooms, and 1 bowling alley in Boscobel. Gary wanted $9,000 for the whole route, cash, because he was tired and his knees were bad, and he didn't want to deal with a broker. You paid him in an envelope at the Hardee's off Highway 61. Net income, once you learned the restocking rhythm, $740 a month, minus gas. Then came the storage units, 4 acres of scrubland outside Cassville that nobody wanted because it flooded twice a decade, bought for $22,000 from a farmer named Alvin Kettner who was retiring to Arizona. You put up gravel, not concrete, and 40 steel units, and charged $45 a month each. Even at half occupancy, that was $900 a month before you'd fully built it out. Then the billboard easement, a strip of frontage along Route 133 that a regional ad company leased from you for $650 a month, a deal that took 1 phone call and a signature, because you already owned the land from a parcel you'd bought alongside the storage lot. 4 assets, 4 small, unglamorous checks arriving on 4 different days of the month. Nobody watching from outside would have seen a pattern. They'd have seen a parts counter guy who also, for some reason, owned some real estate. What they couldn't see was the spreadsheet, rows and rows of it, growing by one line every year or two, each line boring enough that nobody ever asked to see it. By 33, the spreadsheet had 9 lines on it. The pharmacy turned laundromat, the parking spaces, the vending route grown to 19 machines, the storage lot expanded twice, the billboard easement, a second laundromat bought out of foreclosure in Lancaster, and a car wash on the edge of Platteville you picked up from a man named Wendell Ashbrenner, who was retiring after 26 years and just wanted someone who'd keep it running, not flip it. You paid him $61,000 for it, financed through the same small bank that had watched you pay off Doris Halverson's note a decade earlier without ever missing a month. That's where you met Blaine Torkelson. Blaine sold recreational vehicles at a dealership in Dubuque and showed up to the Grant County Business Mixer every spring in a different truck, always leased, always the loudest one on the lot, always with a story about the boat, the cabin up near Land of Lakes, the trip to Cabo. He wore a watch that cost more than your first laundromat and talked over people who owned actual buildings while you stood by the coffee urn in a canvas jacket with a broken zipper pull. Blaine never once asked what you did. He'd already decided the first time he saw the truck that there was nothing worth asking about. You let him keep deciding that. Being underestimated by a man like Blaine wasn't an insult, it was cover. The harder part came from Dana. Dana was your younger sister, 3 years behind you, married to a man named Kurt who'd lost his job at the tannery in Prairie du Chien and hadn't found steady work since. She called you on a Sunday in October, voice tight, asking if you could help with the mortgage, not forever, just this once, just to get through the winter. You had the number sitting in an account. You could have solved it in one transfer and never thought about it again. You didn't do that. Instead, you drove out to her place with the spreadsheet you'd built for yourself and a legal pad, and you sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours, building a real budget. What was fixed, what was flexible, what Kurt's unemployment actually covered, where the gaps were. You co-signed a short-term loan through the same small bank instead of writing a check, small enough that she'd feel it, structured so she'd have to make the payments herself. It cost you an uncomfortable evening and a strained silence in the truck on the way home. A check would have been easier. A check also would have taught her nothing except that the problem could always be made to disappear by someone else, and you'd watched that lesson ruin people before. Kurt found work at the ethanol plant in April. Dana still uses the budget. The number arrives the way it always does. Not with a phone call, not with champagne, but in an email from Carol Nystrom, the accountant in Platteville who's done your books since the laundromat years. Subject line, just 2025 summary attached. You open it standing at the kitchen counter in the same house you bought for $89,000 at 26, wearing the same canvas jacket with the zipper pull you never replaced because a new one seemed like a strange thing to spend money on. Combined equity across the properties, the vending route, the 2 laundromats, the car wash, the storage lot, and the billboard easement, net of the remaining note on the Platteville building, $11,400,000. You read it twice, then you close the laptop and go finish the dishes because the dishes don't know what the number is and don't care. That evening, you drive out to the storage lot to check on a gate latch a tenant mentioned was sticking, and you take the truck, the same Ranger, the same dent in the tailgate, 17 years old now and still running because you've never given anyone a reason to think it shouldn't be. You fix the latch yourself with a socket set that's older than some of your buildings. On the way home, you stop at the gas station on Route 133 for coffee, 50 cents cheaper than the diner, and the same woman from the DMV is 2 people ahead of you in line, and she doesn't look at you twice this time either. Doris Halverson died 4 years ago, but her daughter still lives 2 streets over, and sometimes she waves when you drive past the old pharmacy, now a laundromat that's been running for 16 years without ever needing a sign more than the hand-painted board that says "Wash." Blaine Torkelson still shows up to the spring mixer in a new truck every year. You still don't correct what he assumes. Nobody in Cassville has ever asked you the real number, and you've never once volunteered it. So the question isn't whether anyone finds out, it's whether you'd still build it this way if they never did.